Allah, 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 Allah.
If someone was talking about the Middle East and the conflict there and saying that it's too hard to be solved because the main three religions there are just too different, what would you reply?
Well, there is a long and very conflicted history in the Middle East, and organized religion, of course, has been part of the problem, there's no question. And then the way that that has been tied to culturalism, nationalism, these are all, of course, problems. From the mystical point of view, many mystics, Middle Eastern mystics, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, have said that there's something about what is being worked out in the Middle East that is being worked out for the human psyche as a whole. The Middle East isn't actually a fixed place. It's not a continent like Africa or Asia or Europe. It's really the meeting place of three continents, Africa, Asia, and then the European landmass, pushed together in this area in what's called the Great Rift Valley. And in this very volcanic area, is a lot of, you could say, underground pressures in this area, has upwelled this spirituality, this religion that I tend to call native Middle Eastern. And then prophets have come over a period of time to renew this ultimately nomadic understanding that we don't have any fixed abode, we don't have any fixed possession, but there's one reality behind all of this. If we look from Abraham to Moses, to Jesus, to Muhammad, they all carried really more or less the same message. Now these messages were then made into concepts or more organized forms that are the religions we know today. But for the mystics of these traditions, there is one spirituality that unites them. And they all said this in one way or another. Jesus says in Gospel of John, before Abraham was, I am. That is, I'm part of this longer tradition that goes back to creation, to Adam and Eve. Not him individually, but what his transmission came from, where his inspiration comes from the Holy One, comes from Elohim or Allah, and it's from before any of the prophets. And Muhammad says something very similarly. Abraham also was a nomad, and so was Moses, had to leave his home country and travel. And they also realized, that there's this one being behind all can't be owned by any culture, can't be owned by any fixed nation. It's something that is, it's a mystery, and the way we've tended to tell these stories are just our way of understanding what this mystery of the divine consciousness really is about. And so perhaps on a planetary level, this is what's trying to be worked out very slowly, that there is some people talk about today, a planetary consciousness developing around ecological concerns. The next step would be to realize that there is some consciousness behind all of it, no matter how we tell the story of how we came to be. And all of these stories are trying to really relate to us how best to live with each other, which again, all the prophets relate very clearly as love your neighbor as yourself, or some variation thereof. So I would say, though, there aren't as many differences. There's very little difference in the spirituality of these traditions. There can be differences when we divide things up into organized religion. And so this is part of what needs to be overcome.
Yeah, I read that some scholars say that some Sufis and some Jewish mystics, for example, in the Middle Ages, they even shared some of their methods or of their practices.
That's true. We found this in Spain in a particular period, and also in the Middle East during some of the Ottoman period. We did find this exchange. Jews, Middle Eastern Christians, and Muslims together. For instance, from the Christian side, we find in the writings of Khalil Gibran a very clear expression in his writings of this you could say, non-Western, more Aramaic type of Christianity expressed in his various books. His denomination of Christians were Aramaic speaking up until the 20th century. Then they switched to Arabic. But you still find in his stories and in his book about Jesus an expression of the same sort of spirituality that we find in the Jewish mystics and also in the Sufis, the mystics of Islam.
Allah, Allah,
lately, I just read that one of your teachers, Murshid Sam, also was thinking a lot about this, the whole Near East or Middle Eastern peace process.
Yes, Samuel Lewis's idea, this is Murshid Samuel Lewis, the Sufi, his inspiration about the Middle Eastern peace process was based on some of what I've just related. He felt that all of the holy places of the Middle East should actually be denationalized, which is a radical proposal, so that they would be open to people of all traditions, all faiths, or even perhaps no faith. And so that then these would be places of sacred pilgrimage that would not belong to any particular country, but would always be available as places of refuge, places of prayer, places of meditation. And he felt that when that sort of network of peace were established in the Middle East, then we would see the nationalism and the political differences gradually, you could say, dissolve. But it would have to be solved on this, you could say, more spiritual basis first, which actually could be quite true. Again, if you look at this area in the long span of human history, various nationalities, various cultures, various peoples have moved through these areas. It's almost impossible to say that any particular people was there from the very beginning. Because again, it's not a continent, it's not an island. It was a place through which nomads were constantly traveling from tens of thousands of years before any of the stories were told or any of the scriptures were written. So who really owns this land? Well, no one. And again, perhaps that's, again, the message that we don't really own the earth in the sense of what these stories talk about. We may live here for a period of time, but ultimately we go, we leave. And so it's best to get along with each other, in as loving and as friendly a way as possible, rather than to hold on to what isn't ours in any case.
Allah.